Let's go to a news report by Mike Wallace that helps us appreciate McCarthyism.
In the late 1940s and the 50s, an epidemic of fear swept across America, a fear of communist aggression abroad, coupled with the divisive fear of communist subversion at home. As a result, many decent American citizens found their patriotism challenged by unknown accusers, their reputations ruined, their careers destroyed, all in the name of national security. For many Americans, the world seemed to be spinning out of control.
America seems to be the most powerful, the most moral nation on earth, and yet it is losing everywhere to the communists. Eastern Europe is going communist. China just goes to the communists. How do you explain this?
It was true that China had fallen to the communists. It was also true that professional Soviet spies, with the help of a few American traitors, had successfully stolen America's greatest secret. The Soviet Union now had the atomic bomb, and a nuclear World War III suddenly had become a real possibility.
Duck and cover.
We all know the atomic bomb is very dangerous. Since it may be used against us, we must get ready for it. That's why these children are practicing to duck and cover just as you do in your school.
Americans built bomb shelters and stockpiled food. And just as in World War II, they kept sharp lookout for homegrown spies and saboteurs.
They really feared communism. After all, we were engaged in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. Communism was the greatest menace to our lives, to our welfare, to our security.
Communism was so frightening to many Americans that they were willing to stand by and do nothing as traditional American principles of justice were overturned, all in the name of national security.
So-called Red Scares before the war. There was one after World War I. But this time, the communist menace was supported by this huge military power, the Soviet Union. And of course, we gave the Soviets far more credit than they deserved as far as their weaponry and their reach was concerned. But it gave us a kind of a Satan figure. And
His physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates...
Since most Americans had no idea what a communist was, government propaganda films provided helpful hints.
More difficult to detect are the undercover workers of communism. They can be discovered only through sharp vigilance over a long period of time.
Anti-communist paranoia swept the country in 1946, when news broke that Igor Guzenko, a cipher clerk at the Soviet embassy in Ottawa, had identified real Russian spies operating throughout North America. Arrests and deportations followed. Ethel Rosenberg, convicted of selling atomic secrets to the Soviet Union, became the first woman in U.S. peacetime history to be executed for espionage.
Yes, there was a certain amount of fear there. I never felt it. The people I lived with never felt it. Nobody where I grew up was looking over his or her shoulder to see if the Red Menace was crawling up through Ebbets Field or something. It wasn't. But there were people who felt it, and I think media particularly, it was the last days before television took over. The media in particular, the Hearst chains and a lot of the sort of right-wing conservative chains of newspapers helped feed the fear.
Communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition...
People come to accept the idea that subversives shouldn't have the same rights as everybody else.
A quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
From the climate of fear sweeping the nation. When Joseph Persico was writing a biography of Edward R. Murrow many years later, he asked the FBI to send whatever it had on Murrow in its files.
I got back 1,000 pages. You would have thought that I had asked for the file on Vladimir Lenin, not an upstanding American.
The 7-inch thick, 1,354-page FBI file on Edward R. Murrow is just one of tens of thousands that the Federal Bureau of Investigation accumulated on American citizens. Files bulging with unsupported allegations of disloyalty and reckless charges of subversion. Such files were proof that Americans had become frightened not just of Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong, but of one another. And some politicians were quick to exploit that fear for their own narrow political purposes.
The Republican Party, and particularly the isolationist wing in the center of the country, had been out of power and had lost 5 elections in a row. And they understand that Roosevelt has so changed the demographics of the country with the New Deal and those reforms that they cannot campaign on economic issues. So they have to seize on the issue of subversion, implying that the Democrats have been in cahoots with the communists.
The actual number of Americans who were hardcore, card-carrying, dues-paying members of the Communist Party was never more than 0.1% of the population of the United States, even during the depth of the Depression. And it's likely the FBI knew just who all of them were. The real Soviet agents and spies, the ones who managed to steal the secrets of the atomic bomb, for example, wouldn't be caught dead at a Communist Party meeting. But the party members, and those who had only flirted with the Communist Party in their youth, they made easy targets for politicians looking for someone to blame for the reversal of America's fortunes in the post-war world.
Order in these chambers.
In 1947, the House Un-American Activities Committee went to Hollywood to investigate allegations of communist subversion of the American movie industry. And it was quite a show.
Go ahead with it. Everyone, please sit down.
The first HUAC witnesses were famous and friendly and eager to please.
I have never read Karl Marx, and I don't know the basis of communism beyond what I've picked up from hearsay. What I've heard, I don't like it.
I would move to the state of Texas if it ever came here, because I think the Texans would kill them on sight.
Then came the unfriendly witnesses.
We're going to get the answer to that question if we have to stay here for a week.
And the fireworks that made the hearings front-page news.
The question is, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I'm framing my answer in the only way in which any American citizen can frame his
Then you
answer
denied,
to a question
then
which
you
invades his absolutely invades
Then
his
you
right.
denied.
In the end, 7 screenwriters, 2 directors, and 1 producer refused to answer the committee's questions, and they became what was known as the Hollywood 10. All of them went to jail for contempt of Congress, including 2-time Oscar-winning screenwriter Ring Lardner Jr. and Hollywood movie director Edward Dmytryk.
We thought that we had a right to believe what we wanted to believe, and even though I wasn't a communist, I thought there was no law against communism in this country. And I believe that everybody, in other words, it was a matter of principle.
And we had come to the conclusion that the only way to handle this was not to answer the questions.
I can belong to any party that I see fit to join, and you have no right to fight it.
So, you fight a battle, you lose it, you suffer. You don't cry. You take your beating. Isn't that what you do? Isn't that the old American spirit?
Those who resisted the congressman were the exception rather than the rule. Most of Hollywood seemed willing to cooperate. As a result, more than 300 writers, directors, and actors, all suspected of being communists, or of knowing communists, or of having communist sympathies, were put out of work, blacklisted by the movie industry, with no chance to refute the allegations.
Hollywood was closed down as far as we were concerned.
My wife was also blacklisted in the business simply because she was my wife, not because she was a communist, because she certainly never was.
There were no heroes and no villains, only victims on both sides.
All right. It is within this framework that Edward